Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Very glad to be here in London. And yeah, it was a bit cold here. I come from a bit further away. So now it's a bit warm. Anyway, responsive web design. Did you guys know that more than 50% of global web traffic come from mobile devices, mobile phone, tablet? And that statistic highlight the key importance of responsive web design, which technically means you want the website to look good on desktop, on mobile, on other devices. And it is a topic for today, the evolution of responsive web design. And yeah, I think let's get right into it. Tim Berners-Lee invented the web in the 90s. The early proposal was about sharing information. And I was not there when he was proposing it. A lot of things have changed. But then I think there's a lot of concepts that are very important, including client and server and browser. So talking about browser, I don't have the first browser to show you guys, but I have IE 1.0, the 96. Seems like that's when there's a window and then IE was really popular. Everyone has Windows, isn't it? Maybe Mac OS come a bit later. Early on, I don't think there's a lot of tooling to build a website. And once again, I was not there when HTML table was the main tool for building layouts. As you can see on the screen there, hopefully you can see it. The back okay, you can read it. So the code here is just a table, and you mix up row span, column span, and you can have a very kind of flexible layout with sign up and content and footer. So I show you some of the example. Okay, so this one is still live today. You go into spacejam.com/96. It had to have the www, but it's still live, and the whole thing will be with table. Interestingly. I'll just draw a white border to highlight it. But look into the second row. You see that the first one was putting into the right kind of places, the right cell. Then the center was taking column span, row span. Once again, that was built with table. Very cool. Once again, I was not there when seeing all of this table layout, but eventually I got a touch on some of it when I was in university. We'll talk about it later. Other technology was also very popular, like Flash. Table was popular, but Flash was also very popular. You can build animated like movie to fit well for game, I would say. But then also use Flash to build website, interestingly. And there's a couple of problems with Flash. It's not very accessible. It's not SEO friendly and all of that. So along the same period of time, we also got the popular rise of mobile browsing, where just so many devices, like the phone, has browser on the phone, essentially. And then you can see on the screen, the browser on the phone has certain limited on capability. It doesn't do well as a desktop version. And so if you build for mobile at that time, likely you need to build a specific version for mobile. If you don't really see a difference on the URL, there's m.something. m.something. It is really for mobile. And it's, which means certain design element was missing on mobile. Certain functionality was not there because it's built specifically for mobile. And I think the breakpoint was coming when iPhone was introduced in 2007. I saw a lot of people using iPhone at that time. I didn't have money to buy one, but I saw people using it. It's so smooth. That's the point. The point is iPhone is really, the touch interface was intuitive. And Safari, that's what Steve Jobs said, we bring the real browsing experience to mobile. Which means, doesn't matter what you're doing, the Safari browser will request the desktop version anyway. So even you try to build specifically for mobile, it seems to be it's still trying to request the desktop version. And as you can see here, it's kind of okay, it's all right? But the zooming in and zooming out, if you need to do it, I don't know, for 5 minutes, maybe it's not my town. But the unified experience on mobile and desktop becoming more and more crucial since the day iPhone was introduced. Anyone read this article before? Responsive web design? Raise your hand. No? Okay, so that's on the May 2010, that is the term responsive web design was born kind of thing. You call it with different name. But Ethan was the one who putting a name to it. So I think that's when we started to call responsive web design, outlining a few fundamental principles. But the idea is very simple. We wanted to have a unified and user-friendly experience on both desktop and mobile. That's the 3 fundamentals that you can look into. Fluid grid, it's like using percentage. Flexible image is more like you set the width on image, so that is kind of scale 100%, very simple, max width 100% or something. And then CSS media query. We are going to talk more into CSS media query, but that's the 3 fundamental principles was introduced in the article. So look into the history. We had responsive web design, 2010. Then 12 was media query was kind of officially recommended. And then during the same time, you see so many JavaScript framework popularize the idea of component-based SPA that's only familiar today. And 2017 gets CSS Grid. So we are going to talk not just all of that old stuff, for sure, but I just want to mention that, some old stuff is still very interesting to look into a bit deeply. So look into this design, right? When you look into this design, the first response coming from designer maybe, to make it look good on mobile, you might want to, wrap the hero, or you want to stack the cog, so it's the row is becoming color. And then the idea when you write code that make the website look good on desktop, and then you write code to make it look good on mobile, we call it desktop first. You write first on desktop, so it's desktop first. I think it's as simple as that. The other way, you write code to make it look good on mobile, and then you write code to make it look good on desktop. Mobile first, simple as that. And so, when I hear about responsive web design, it just suddenly becoming, it's something, the thinking on my mind was, you think about device sizes, the different sizes of the devices itself, like mobile phone, tablet, desktop. And a lot of time we think about using only media query to solve all of the problem. But there's a different take on Excel Pro. So we talk about responsive to the content, to the viewport, to the container, and to user preferences. But before we get into that, that's a little introduction about myself. My name is Trung. I'm the author of a few open source projects in Angular. I'm not sure if anyone still uses Angular today. Oh, hey, for sure. The example I've been put in Angular, but then it's very easy to understand. Anyway, I'll organize a few meetups in Singapore, in Vietnam, and I'm the GD in Angular, Google Developer Expert, if you don't know about that. I flew over from Singapore, so like I mentioned, it is quite warm in Singapore the whole year. So here, a bit cold. Actually, really cold. I come from a neighbor country, here's Vietnam, just a few hours different. And that's Singapore, you never been, so come visit us one day, for sure, see? Sunny, apply. And currently I'm with Ascenda. We simplify loyalty for bank, payment network, and merchant globally. So we look into the first part, responsive to the content. Look into the UI. Simple, right? Let's this article, view all, look nice. On the right side, the text is a bit longer, but it still look quite nice. And it's very simple to be really, so stay with me in this room, okay? Because we are going to some simple example first. the example we look into is here. It is a media player that I built, or Angular Spotify. You can look it up on GitHub. It's public, it's free, okay? But the idea here is like, when it's just top album and so on, it looks very nice. Where there's enough space, it looks so nice. Nothing wrong with it. And we look into the code quickly. There is a div, there is a h3, and an a. And because h3 is a block, so you can see that it's flow, one row, another. So I want it to put into the same line. So I do a flex. I think that's what we do nowadays. Before it's not the same, the thing, but... And I want to have some space between. So I just do a justify content space between. Very simple. And it kind of works, for sure. But when I have a longer content, right? Because flex itself is trying to squeeze item into the same rows. So that now the header trying to squeeze itself, is break itself, and then CO is also trying to break itself. Look into the dev tool, you see a bit more clearer. There's not enough space. So that both of them need to kind of wrap itself. And depends on the requirement. It's look all right. I don't say it's look bad, but it's all right, but it could be better. So we can do something simple. Put a rough. That's it. If there's not enough space to put all of the flex element into the same row, you do a flex rough. And that's what we do, I assume. But, looks simple like that. But in the span of how many years, we try so many solutions. I think position absolute, as you can see, it's just trying to overlap everything, right? Doesn't work well. Float right, always stick to the right side. It doesn't be part of the layout anymore. It's kind of take out. So you can see that it's breaking to new lines. Table doesn't work well. And there's only flex. Very simple, but when flex was introduced, it solved so many problems. That was really hard before. So the first takeaway is flex wrap. But I assume everyone knows flex wrap. So it's nothing to talk about flex wrap, really. But when you look into this form, now it's a bit more interesting. Look closely how it behaves when you shrink the screen. Okay? Now the button is down. You shrink a little bit more. The text box and the button is now on the second row. And you shrink all the way. Now everything on individual row. And the first time I saw the example, I was like, how? Because it doesn't change the screen size at all. You change the content. And how it behaves. Like it's just built with flex, really. So you see the code in the next line. Okay, it's a bit more, a lot of code on the screen, overwhelming a bit. But yeah, you can see just there's a form. Inside there's 3 elements. And then you use flex to control them. But the code of flex is very simple still, like this flex and rough. That's what you need, but it's not enough. You need to set something we call flex basis, which most of the time I don't use it at all, really, because I have a hard time understand like flex basis. But I think the idea of flex basis is, because flex can be different direction, the row, the column. So flex basis can be understand both width and height sometimes. It's not the same as width and height, because you set width, that's all over the width, right? It's not following the main X, a flex container, but here you set a few number. Look very arbitrary, but it makes sense in the next line, okay? So the flex basis, the idea is just set the initial size for the element. But because flex, you have grow and shrink, so the initial size, if it doesn't really work well, then it's will shrink or grow, depending on what you set. So here, the number is coming from 160, 220, and 80. That's what we said before. And then when you see into the UI, there is a 3 flex element. So which means we have 2 little gap between them, right? 2 gaps, so that's why you do 16 times 2, because I put gap of 1 rem. So you got to this number, 492 pixel. Very important. Because on 491, it starts to break. And it starts to work. It just starts to adapt itself. It's very interesting to see how Flex can do this. I never thought it can do it, but somehow it can, right? I also don't read the Flex source code and understand the whole layout algorithm, but it's interesting to see. And with just Flex and then basis and then some sizes, you can have very flexible layout. That's the first layout we have. The second one, where the button is on the own row, two text box together. And then, the email and the button now together. And then last one, everyone is on their own row. So if you never really look through Flex basis, I recommend just look into it a bit to kind of see what it can do more. But hopefully the example makes sense. Okay. Anyone do flows before? Okay, there's some laughing, not the whole audience laughing. So you don't get it, that's fine. I do a bit of float, that's why I mentioned, right? There was a time you need to convert all of this table into something. And then this something is a float. You've been there before, you kind of understand it, but you've never been there, that's fine. Now we don't have to use it anymore. Depends on the use cases. Next one, important. Responsive to the viewport. And look into this. You see that is a viewport width. It's a whole browser. You have a header. So header is something usually need to adapt based on device size because it's take up the whole width. And you can see that also there's a grid below. But we don't talk about grid because kind of grid is a bit more interesting to talk into. How you do it is likely you just use media to set up all of this, header behavior. And that's work okay. In a lot of use cases, you use max width or min width. But max height is something you can look into as well. Max height here is like on portrait mode, when the height is long, you want the header to be sticky. But on the, on the landscape mode, it's gone. It's not sticky anymore. Because I saw it before. It's just so annoying when you see a big header cover everything and you don't have space to read content. So if you don't really use height, for sure there's use case that we can use height. But the good old days is when you use media query to build a grid system. I don't know where's the number 12 coming from, okay? It's not the answer for everything in the universe, but we decided to go with 12 column grid system in most of the framework, including the most popular one, Bootstrap. So if you've been there, let's look into the next slide. Okay. Okay. This technology, is it working? Oh, there's a company laptop, so there's some update was pop up on this screen. Okay, so look into the code a bit more. And you can see here we have a row, we have colon SM6, and then because 6 is like 1/2 of 12, so you have 2 columns on the screen. And what we did before, it's not as easy. That Flex was like introduced in Bootstrap 4 or something. Before 4 was using display block and then float, but we don't talk about it. So we just use Flex and do a rough and set a basis and also the width. It doesn't care about the height. It is because it's the grid system. And you will be like, oh, actually I want to have more column on the bigger screen. And then what we do is like you do a media query, you put a new class name, MD is like bigger, right? Small, medium, and then large. And then you set the width a bit smaller. When you set the width a bit smaller, you have more space, more column. That's it, very simple. 2 column, 3 column on the bigger screen. What about now? Oh, okay, for now, we can, first of all, look into the grid. We render the item using a for loop. Okay? So I have something here. You have an album bread, and then below there's something. And then I just put a card grid on the container itself. And then And you can see there's nothing changed. They stick together. There's no gap. So I tried to put in something we call display grid. You use it before? Anyone use display grid before? Okay, most of them. Good. Very good. When you put in grid, the important thing is like nothing changed. It's the same. You put display grid, it's not like Flex. Flex, you have many elements. It's try to put it into the same row, but grid, nothing changed. So okay, fine. I put in a gap. So now there's space between them. There is a little gap between the element. But if I want to put more, I want to have 2 columns. I do repeat 2, 1FR. 2 is the fixed number, okay, just 2. So if I want to have more column, what do? I do the same approaches. I put a media query, and I put repeat 3. Makes sense? I think that's simple, right? We use 33%, and then now it's repeat 3. Very similar, make a lot of sense. And then it's render 3 column. And then it's kind of working, right? You resize a little bit, and okay, 2 column. Swipe a bit more. Now it's 3 column. Pay closely attention, slow. But it's kind of working, that's what I try to say, okay? But like the question is, if you have a bigger screen, and then, of course the screen doesn't stop at 102824. So you wanted to put more stuff, repeat 4, 5, 6, and you keep doing it. That's really what it is. I used to do it before, so I understand. And then just before we go into the interesting topic, just look into the way we use setting up the grid. It's the same thing, the container, there's some element inside like a children. And on the left side, we have flex. On the right side, we have grid. The left side is the old one, the right side is kind of a bit new. On the left side, there's a huge difference on the left and on the right. On the left, you set the width on the children. On the right side, you put the number of columns on the container itself. So that is a huge difference. You don't say, I want my cell to be 50% width so that surrounding me can fit more thing into. You tell the parent to say, there's 2 columns on my whole container. That's different. Very simple. Working. But if you have something, as resignable, navbar, then because the code we build is surrounding the constraint of media query, which means the device side, and you can see in this case, the device side doesn't change at all. What's changing is the content that's rendered. Grid, too fast. The change thing, the thing has been changed was the container itself, right? The grid container. But because, the grid doesn't change, the device side doesn't change. 3 column, 3 column, 3 column. Oh yeah, you laugh already, so it doesn't make surprising anymore. So, introducing something very interesting in grid. It's been old, 2017, but for some reason, a lot of people I talk to doesn't know about. So all of this code is combined to a single line of code, where there is, instead of magic, instead of just, a fixed number of items, now you can say 2 things, autofill and autofit. We look into it quickly, so don't worry. Autofill, and then you can say min max. Min here is like the grid children can, the children within the grid cannot be smaller than that number. It's 200 pixels fixed. It will not go below than 200 pixels. 1FI is a dynamic unit, so it can grow as big as it can. But this shows everything. Autofill, we look into it first, okay? Just so the code doesn't really demonstrate anything. You need to look into the demo. But then I just code it quick like RAM, repeat, auto something and min max. Hope it makes sense. Remember, it's IAM, RAM. And it's still working. Right. You resize the screen, it's working. It changes the number of items based on the constraint of it cannot be smaller than 200 pixels. And if it can render more, then just grow more. Like between 2 columns and 3 columns, the item can just grow a little bit more. But this is working as well. Like when you have a resignable navbar, and because now you don't fix a number, and you don't do all of this media query, min width, max width, kind of now the grid say, okay, if my container was like 400 something, I can render 2 columns, then I do 2 columns. Very simple. So it's very dynamic. That's what I like. And for some reason, a lot of people don't know. And that was introducing, I think, in 2017. It was long ago. It was not new. So we look into autofill and autofit. Okay, so autofill, it doesn't expand when there's more space available. Autofit, it tries to still fit in the space available. It doesn't really make sense now. It's going to make sense in the next slide. Which you can see here, the top is autofill. It can render technically 5 items, but I only have 4 children. So what does it do? It just render 4. That's it. The one here, it's kind of a placeholder. It doesn't do anything with it. It's still there. But autofit, what it's trying to do is like, if I have the space for 5 and I have only 4 items, I'll try to just expand X children to a little bit further to fit the available space. You look into this, you kind of understand. There is one here, doesn't do anything. The below, try to fit all of the space. But the autofit thing is also have a problem because when you have a lot of space and you only have just a few children, then this is becoming so huge, right? It tries to fit itself. So there's 2 items trying to fit in the space for 5. So it depends on the use case. So you choose what you want to do. It's working. Yeah. Yeah, but the takeaway from here was very simple. Autofit, autofill, repeat. Remember, it's IAM. If you know about that's fantastic. But if you don't know about it yet, then maybe the next time you are building a grid, you don't really rely on media query or anything. It's just one single line of code. I hope it makes sense. Exciting. And the old day before grid, to really like having bootstrap and then you don't want to have a padding at the end, at the beginning. It is really hard. You want some space between the item. Now it seems to be easy, but it used to be really hard. I still remember I do last child, first child, all of this, just to have no gap, no clutter between them. Just to remind that gap is so powerful. Next one, container. Container is interesting because all of our time, media query for a long time, you only has one constraint, the screen. I want to know the size of the screen. Container, with this new thing, we call it container query here. You can know a size of the div in CSS, which never be a thing before. You have to use JavaScript for that kind of, you want to know that's 500 pixels, you use JavaScript and then you observe this element, and you kind of get the width from it, the size from it. But now with container query, you can use this add container. We look into it in detail, don't worry. But the idea of the container here is like, okay, when I have a bit more space in the grid, I want it to be this, vertical card layout thing from top to bottom. But when there's more space, if you do the same thing, the card becoming so big. You've just seen the example before. And then now you want it to be a vertical kind of card. There's the image on the left, there's the content on the right, instead of the top and the bottom. So before we can do it, for sure, it's not something we cannot do, but we need a bit of JavaScript to make it work. But now you can look into it later. You see it. You're not spoil the truth. Look closely. That's top to bottom. That's left to right. Different. All with CSS. So we stop here, 2017. It's like we stop in time. Now we look into something new. 2011, there is something we call containment module. That's enable all of this container query. That's the fundamental. And I was not go into it. It's just a very deep topic. Then container query was introduced, actually not 2024. It's been there for a year now, 2023 in Valentine. It's not like introduced on that day, but it's kind of stable. All of the major browsers support it last year, Valentine Day. Very important. I know why. But we look into the same example from, again, Angular Spotify. That's the link. You can, give a star. When you build open source project, you don't expect to receive a lot of feedback. Because my project was just building some application. It's not a library. So usually doesn't have a lot of feedback. And then one day, there's one guy say, hey, actually, this button doesn't work. It's kind of wrapping. It doesn't look nice. I use it. So he doesn't use Spotify. He uses my app for some reason. Maybe this will build with Angular. That's a fast framework. Yeah. But what caught my eye was not the button. The button is easy to fix. What caught my eye was like, on mobile or when it's not enough space, the card is too big. It's just too big. You kind of only render one card. What's the point, right? 1.5 below, 1.5. You cannot see a lot of things. Like, why, right? And I tried to find a solution, and then I saw container query. So we look into how it's been done. But the way I render the card, you write Angular code, you kind of understand this. But I think it makes sense, right? That's 4. It's more like array.for in React. And then you have the container, the item. And the grid, we're using the same thing that we just mentioned before. Nothing new. And then when it's wider, it looks nice, right? Every single element has like 210 pixels. It's satisfied the constraint of 200 pixels. So it's rendered nicely. And then in one breakpoint, the number is not too big, but 791. It just becomes so big, like 400 something. So big. I didn't really test it, so it's my open source project. So we need to look into the card now, because now we are not talking about the grid. The grid is fine. The grid is working. Now we talk about the individual card itself. So out of the card, there's an A-link that covers everything. It doesn't really necessarily accessible, but we'll talk about it later. There is a cover and there's a body. Very simple. There's an image, there's a content. That's how it is. And that's how it's rendered by default. I didn't do anything at all. That look kind of okay. So I put a padding. Okay, it's not easy to see, but there's a padding here at the text back. Yeah, there's no padding. And I had a display flag. And for some reason, when I put display flag, the cover is gone. The code for the cover is a bit tricky. I use padding bottom 100% to make it like 1:1, like a square, instead of using the aspect ratio and new thing. So that's why, when you have just a div with a background, with a padding, you put in flag, it just collapses. Like there's nothing there. So I put a direction column, it's working again. So it's not, trying to squeeze things into one row anymore. And then I put a gap. The gap is here. Okay, maybe it's, for some reason, the background is blended, but you don't see it, but it's there's a gap here. And, if I try to solve the problem with media query, that's how it looks like. I targeting the breakpoint, that make it look ugly, 791, and then I set the row. Now it's row. And then because the cover was collapsing, so I need to set a 64 pixel. So there's some width, there's some content. It's not collapsing anymore. So it looks nice. I mean, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards instead of 1.5. Better. What is it actually? Sorry, I did some slide last night. Okay, just try to show the differences. Left and the right, okay? It look a bit nicer. Not a lot nicer, but it's still nicer. Sound good. Doesn't really work in all use cases. It's still working, not all use cases. What I mean here is like, let me place it. Is it playing now?
Yeah, if you have a wider screen.
Oh yeah, so more like you know, the width of the screen is not the only constraint anymore, like I mentioned before. On the web application nowadays, there's so many things that can change on the size. So here, once again, I take a very simple example. I do it's not very clear, okay? So it's like I resize the navbar again. I make it smaller so that the width has more content. But when there's more content and this satisfying the 200 pixels minimum, it doesn't come back as the vertical cut because we're still targeting the width of the device. And here the device width doesn't change, only the content change. So it's okay, kind of still working, but can be nicer for sure, right? Because in this, you can see that the text is a bit, too short to show the text. You still want the vertical layout instead of the horizontal layout. You still want this instead. So, CSS container query. Basically, CSS container query is like you can tell the element to behave on a containing element sizes. So it's not just the device size anymore. It can be a div, a parent div, a content div somewhere above on the tree. But before we get into that, there's something exciting as well. Range query, okay? Anyone here has like hard time trying to write a content, like not container, it's media query with max width and min width? Because technically, max width and min width, there is inclusive. And sometimes my mind just doesn't work. It's like, I was like, max, is it greater or smaller? And then min, is it greater or smaller? I have a hard time figure it out. It's not working immediately for me. I'm not sure about you, but it doesn't work for me. And then, now we have something, range query. Okay? It's now using a mathematical kind of sign. So for me, it's worked a lot better. Yeah. And it's not inclusive. So if you say inclusive, it means you say max width 1090, it needs to be that 1090 or, like you can see, I have a hard time trying to explain it. So this one is work a lot better for me. And it's work with, the range as well. Like, it's not just min width and max width, you can say it's smaller than and smaller than. It's a lot more intuitive. So it's work a lot better. But get back to the example. So I'm gonna use the thing here, the range query. But basically, that's the code we have, And okay, that's a lot of shuffling. I'll try to go back again. A lot of shuffling again. But yeah, the idea here is you need a container. If you have a container already, you can reuse it. But I'm just introducing a new div to make things easier. I just call it car container. That's wrapping the whole A tag. And I tell it to be a container using a container shorthand. Okay, container here on top. So car is a name, and inline sign is a specific keyword. We look into it.
So card is there is referring to the class name over on the A.
You mean this?
No, on the right side, container card.
Yep.
So card there is.
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
So the card is like a name. I think it can be anything really. It could be a card container, it can be Trung, just the name, this is arbitrary string, okay? It might be a bit confusing with the car class here. It's not related. It's
Okay,
just,
so,
yeah, it's not related at all. Maybe I put different name on the next slide. But you can see here, you can use container and say, okay, if above me there's container that fit this thing, and then it can fire children with a car class, then now it say the same thing. The styling here is just the same as media, but now you use container instead. And we try to work, let's say there's no card here, for example, there's no container in the card container itself, it try to go a bit upper, go a bit more until you find one. And eventually it might not be able to find one. It just fall back to, I think, media. So hope it's easy to understand. Okay, there's a lot of not. We can still talk about it. I know there's a lot of things going on. But basically, in short, you need a containing element. It could be a div. You need to set a container. You need to set the div to be a container. And then from inside, you can start to query it. And it's going to mesh the thing inside. So look into the syntax. It looks quite familiar. It's quite, between media and container. I think the only difference is like, instead of you add media, you can use add container. And then the sizes inside, it's going to be differences. It's not the same. The number is smaller. Okay. Finish taking photo? Can go to the next slide. So when I use container here, it's like 282. It's very arbitrary. You need to test it out to find the number you want. And then because the card here is 423 pixels, so which means it's greater than 282 pixels. Then it's going to apply the style that we just mentioned. Go back one slide. If the width is greater than 282, and then the width we have is like 423. Sorry, only this number. But it's kind of apply this style. Was it? Oh. Actually, I forgot. I think, sorry, I had some slide last night. So that's the last thing you want to do. But I think here is, okay, sorry. We go next one, okay. We cut it from a video, please. But when you use container to build layout, now it's very flexible. It depends on the which surrounding element. So if you want it, then container is the best option. You can really build a card which is adaptable to the places where the card is living. There's a div here, there's more space. There's a div there, it's lesser space. It's render different thing. In 4 different layouts. Okay? Vertical, horizontal. No, horizontal, vertical. This one is vertical with the bigger cover because there's more space. And the last one is the huge, the kind of feature one. You want it. So when you look into what I have here, it's more like, and you can see the grid is the same. I still use the same grid to render the curve. That's the same component, okay? The same component in 2 places. And I don't use JavaScript to send a prop. I don't say, oh, I want it to be a vertical. And I don't want it to be horizontal. I don't tell the code to render it. It just renders based on the available space surrounding it. Oh, is that the code? I think I just try to highlight it again. That's the code. The only differences, media and container. Then you have such a power to use. And then that is how you will do it with JavaScript. You put in the type. There's a type prop, and then you put in a different classes so that you can render different layout. So container query can help you in these use cases. If you want to. Sorry, something. Okay. Yeah, it just highlight that you need to put a different class to make it work. Kind of working. No. So once again, there is the first step you need to do. It could be container type. container name, or you can shorthand container. And that's how it looks like. That's the syntax. You can look it up, but basically, container type, there's 3 values: normal, size, and inline size. A name could be your cog, multiple name, I never use it, something and cog, 3 name, 4 name. And then you can combine them together. Can be cog and inline size. And you can say, okay, on the top you have a cog layout, container name layout, and somewhere in the tree you can query that I want to style based on the layout width or something. So it doesn't have to be immediate above. It can be somewhere in the tree. It can be above a few levels. So, inline size, what does it mean? Inline size, the way we call it, inline is more like, in a lot of use cases, just think about it, inline size is like a width, okay? We'll not go into all of this, logical property and then direction. But let's say I have a song. So in English, the song flows from left to right. So I think that's, I'm not good on explaining this, but just think about inline size and the width. And then size is both width and height. So if you want to query the height, you need to put the container as container type size. If you only want to query the width, you just do container type inline size. And then the last one doesn't sound very normal at all. Container normal. But I think it's for something new in the future, where you can use CSS, and let's say you put a custom property on the parent, and now you can query it using CSS. So it works very similar like the props we just seen. But then you can use CSS to query it, which is interesting. I never tried it, so for sure. I've just read the article. But it seemed to already working on Chrome, Canary. So it's still, it's on the way to come. I think in the future, you can kind of say, okay, I want to know if my parent background is like brown, I do something. Not just I want to style based on just a custom property, but it's coming. I'm not sure when, I'm not in the team. Anyone know can share later. That's the container type normal. And the second step, okay, that's the first step. First step, you need to define a container. The second step, you add container to query. And then you apply the certain thing into your element. So I think there's a few things you can, there's min width, for sure. You can use range query. Thanks to me later. And then you can use not, and, or, and more things. I haven't used it in my production build. So that is coming from a doc, okay? And it also comes with a lot of unit, okay? So there's CQW, like VW, like CQ hat is VH. So it's, you're familiar with this, it's like a viewport unit that we have. And okay, I'll pass it, I'll skip it. There's a slide for you later. Oh, actually here that's interesting. You can do a clamp. A clamp is like you set a minimum and maximum. And the one in the middle was like, if you have a container, then use CQW. So let's say I have a 300 pixel container, then SCQW width, which means 3 times 8, 300. So 1 is like 3. Times 8 is like 24. So you can have a kind of flexible style based on the container is also using clamp. Very powerful. Okay, I'll show you something live. Yeah? It's on production. It's not my company production, but and the show. So, hello London. You can see. Okay, you log in. Okay, it's not very simple. I can refresh, but when you log in, you can go in and say hello London. You need to select the drop down to play with it, and you need to authenticate with Spotify. That's important. And on the left side, there is a normal cog that we have. The right side, we have a vertical cog. And it's that's English. That's why I listen to West Life. Website on the top for sure. Then there's now below there's Taylor Swift, Coldplay, and just to highlight, it's using the same component, okay? The same card. I didn't change anything. I didn't pass any prop. It just there's how many items is rendered and it's rendered on the UI. But the card is the same. And that is the card we have. Okay? All build with CSS. Oh. And I think, where's the form? Shit, where's the form? There's the form is here. So it's not something I make a video. Okay, it's a code that working. Yes. Okay, so you can play with it. I'll include the link. And let's continue to the last part. I think we are almost there. Okay, so container query is quite new. So I also don't have a lot of use case to share with you guys. But then other people trying to use it before. Like Ahmed, he has a collection of examples he can use. One of that was this newsletter, where you want, at the bottom or in the pop-up module. So if you have something like container query, you can just use the same component. And especially now, we build a newsletter component in React, in Angular. You don't copy the code over anyway. So if the component can kind of isolate itself and then can work on a different containing element, then that's the best thing. And also, I think container query have when we designing things as well, right? It's, at the moment, even my designer team, they designing based on the device. So maybe we can start to have a conversation with designing about, now we can start to build things based on this containing width. So maybe that's the approach we wanted to build. You have to design the card component in different sizes. And then where I use it, it's gonna just fit itself. Very powerful. Browser compatibility is very important. Bạn Thai đây, okay? I didn't make it up. And yeah, most of the browsers support it. Most of the browser. But it needs to be listed. The article was written on Valentine's Day for a reason. So, you want to wait for for the user to upgrade the browser, might be it's a bit long. You can try when you write code to try. But to wait and everyone upgrade to the latest browser doesn't work well. So you can use polyfill if you wanted to try it just on the staging environment, just to see, right? And I think the key takeaway from here is like this: container type, and you add container, 2 steps really, define the container and then query for it. Okay, last but not least. Anyone here you white team? Like, anyone you live team when you write code? Oh yes, awesome. I used to use it. Like I have the VS code is like blue or something, and then I change to dark theme, and then I just never go back. People say when you go dark, you never go black. Go back. Is it relating to software engineer? I'm not sure. But that's not great, huh? Yeah. So the idea of user preference, responsive to user preference, is like you can have a certain preference on operating system or the browser itself. So if your application can support it, then the user will appreciate it. And the example of light theme and dark theme is obvious, because when you don't have the option to prefer, then you just live with whatever it is. And then now I start to change. Oh, okay, that's not funny. Stay. So when you suddenly see a light theme website, you were like, yeah. No, it's not that extreme anyway. It's just for fun. But prefer color scheme. Like I can change something here. I can say I prefer the dark theme. So if the user say I want the dark theme, then if the website is respect the preference, that is really the best thing. Let's say, a big company like Facebook, they do it. I think they do it quite well. I change it, light, dark, it's automatically changed. But even my blog, I didn't apply it, so yeah, it's fine. But if really, the user will appreciate it a lot. So, light theme and dark theme is just one thing. There's so many more, like, invert color. There's reduce motion. There's people who doesn't want to see animation. They can get, motion sickness. It's make them feel unwell. Prefer contrast. You work in the dark environment. You want it to be a bit more and reduce transparency. So there's just a few. I think there's more, but I didn't list it all. So the idea is like, I just give you some suggestion. So you see, prefer something, right? That's the extreme, approach to solve it. You just disable everything. Or you can do a bit more progressively enhanced. When you write code, you say, okay, if he doesn't want it, then I do it. Like if he doesn't have a reduced motion preference, then I do some animation in the code. So instead of just setting everything to none when you write code in the component itself, you can tell that I want to only apply animation when they want it. I think, that's a progressively enhanced and a few value you can look it up later. But I think the most common is color scheme, light theme and dark theme. So, that's a long talk. I never did that. That's an hour talk. But we went a long way, right? Initially, 91, starting with HTML, and it needs to be kept, okay? It needs to be capitalized. It's not just body. It needs to be body in cap. And then you do thing next to element itself. So you need to duplicate, and you can understand. Gradually, you can use CSS. CSS was mind-blowing. You can reuse stuff. And 2023, last year, we have even Photoshop on the web. I was like, that was impressive. So we went a long way. We are here in 2024. All of this we left behind, but there's just so many things that's happening in the web landscape. I think last year was very exciting. I saw so many things. I saw container query, style query, view transition as well. If you use it, it looked really cool. Clam was there before. The hash thing. Hash was kind of a game changer. So it's exciting, I would say. What can I tell? And when I look back into how we do responsive web in general, I think about first is responsive to the content, where you can just write code. So the code is just adapting to the content length. It's also including the IAM that we talked before, because it's likely that's the content itself. Then if you couldn't resolve with content, then maybe now there's container. Container is very useful. It can help the code. It's flexible. Then, for sure, you need media query. It's still there for a reason. I think when you use media query, it needs to only know the browser thing, so it's very fast. But container, you can kind of say, I want my body to be a container and then use container, but there's just so many level on the DOM tree, so it might slow things down. That's one I didn't test, but that's what I assume. So media query is still there. You still can use it when you need it. There's no problem. And the last one, remember about user preference. If the website respects what user want, I think it just brings a lot of interesting, or have the user to appreciate the website a lot more, the developer a lot more. So I think that's easy. And thank you so much. I hope it's interesting. That's how we say thank you in Vietnamese. That's cảm ơn bạn. That's how we say thank you in Singapore. We have 4 languages. There's terima kasih, nandri,谢谢. And once again, thank you. That's a slide. It pays your time. Thanks.